Order. 10-minute rule motion. Ruth Cadbury.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require Her Majesty's Commissioners of Revenues and Customs to record income tax revenues where the payee self-certificates as holding a conscientious objection to public spending on defence purposes and report to Parliament thereon, to place a duty on Her Majesty's Treasury to take account of the amount and proportion of such self-certificated income tax income in preparing the supply estimates and for connected purposes. Mr. Speaker, the central purpose of this bill is to give taxpayers who have a conscientious objection to war the right to direct a non-military security fund the portion of their taxes that would otherwise be spent on military purposes. Mr. Speaker, 100 years ago, during the height of World War I, Britain became the first country in the world to make the legal right of conscientious objection available to all British subjects. The 1916 Military Service Act simultaneously claimed the right to force men to die for their country, whilst also granting the legal right of conscientious objection in Britain for the first time. Thousands of men, including both my grandfathers, registered for exemption to military service on the grounds of conscience. Some conscientious objectors, I'll use the term COs now, some COs, like my grandfathers, took up alternative service, such as driving ambulances and running field hospitals. But others felt they could take no part in any activity connected to the war, and they were imprisoned. But what linked them all was their absolute determination to be true to their beliefs despite marginalisation. Since 1916, the right to conscientious objection has been recognised in every significant international treaty: the European Convention on Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, and the British Human Rights Act. They all testify that everyone has the right to, I quote, freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. Mr. Speaker, the past 100 years has seen immense progress in the democratisation of war. Modern wars are no longer fought with conscript armies. Armed conflict relies now on professional armies and high-tech weapons. Security is supposedly maintained with the ideology of deterrence. In short, war is waged with money rather than manpower, funded by UK taxpayers. And yesterday, this Parliament voted to support the nuclear deterrent at a cost of £30 billion. The law, as it stands, prevents many from acting in accordance with their own conscience, as their tax money is being spent on armed conflict, which they object to on moral, religious, or ethical grounds. Some equate paying for killing with doing it themselves. These few thousand people are faced with two options: either keeping their income below the taxable level, as a lady I met outside earlier today has done all her working life. Alternatively, they can withhold a portion of their tax and face prosecution and bankruptcy. There is no other alternative and no right to object. I would like to thank the campaigning organisation Conscience, Taxes for Peace Not War in helping me prepare this bill. They have been compiling a list of these modern-day conscientious objectors who have been writing statements of conscience, as World War I COs did before then. One of these COs, Diana Warner, said, I quote, we have seen increasingly brutal and far-reaching wars, massive death and displacement of citizens, untold trauma and injury to our soldiers, as well as environmental destruction. As a GP, I work every day for the health and well-being of my patients, and as a taxpayer, I must do the same for the security of people in the UK and elsewhere. I insist, she goes on, I insist on the right as a conscientious objector for my taxes to be used to forge peace and not to be used on the mechanisms of war. So, Mr. Speaker, if conscientious objection can be recognised in wartime, why not in peacetime too? Today, the rights of COs to military tax are being campaigned for across Europe, the USA and Canada. In passing this bill, Britain would lead once again, setting a world precedent and demonstrating ourselves as a leader in human rights and individual freedoms. Mr. Speaker, those who object to funding war and preparation for war still want to contribute to the security of our country and the well-being of our world. So this bill calls for a mechanism for CAs to fund non-military peace building and conflict prevention initiatives which would contribute to national security whilst allowing individuals to pay their taxes with a clear conscience. By permitting the right to invest in peace rather than war, we are not only granting an individual freedom, but also making a substantial step in the direction of a more effective and humane foreign policy. There are two possible destinations for this hypothecated tax. DFID is highly regarded internationally for the promotion of social justice, and this government's commitment to supporting DFID is commendable. The second is a less well-known conflict, security and stability fund. This is a cross-departmental fund of just over £1 billion. It was created by this government to address the causes of international conflict. Mr. Speaker, if Britain were to pass this bill, the UK would make the hard-won right of conscientious objection relevant to today's society by granting the right not to pay for someone to kill on your behalf. But also, we could take a lead in helping to redefine the common understanding of security. Genuine, long-term security is not achieved by ever more sophisticated weapons and increased spending on defence, but by cooperation, negotiation and shared understanding of the problems that face humanity: poverty, ill health and environmental degradation. So, Mr. Speaker, I now wish to move on to address some common objections to a bill of this type. Firstly, this bill is not seeking exemption from paying taxes, but allows COs to pay their fair contribution to national defence with a clear conscience by investing in non-violent alternatives to war and weaponry. COs would rather invest their fair share in longer-lasting and more sustainable means of conflict resolution and prevention. Secondly, the criticism that this bill introduces hypothecation. But is not the government sugar tax to be spent on sports provision for young people not a form of hypothecation? And what about the additional tax on insurance premiums that's going to be allocated to flood prevention? And Mr. Speaker, the UK's most significant form of personal hypothecation would appear to be gift aid, the redirection of personal income tax towards a named charity. This amounted to 1.19 billion in 2014-15. Gift aid is widely used by taxpayers already to direct funding to charitable causes that they prefer. Mr. Speaker, some say that this bill would create a precedent for other pressure groups to petition this House to divert taxes to their favourite causes or away from their personal dislikes. But military tax is specifically an issue of conscience, not a political preference. This principle was recognised 100 years ago by Her Majesty's government. I am laying a case for an extension of that right. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the issue of practicality. Madam Deputy Speaker. The administration of the provision set out in this bill would merely need a signed declaration to HMRC and a transfer of an already calculated sum of money to one named government-controlled fund. The calculations are already provided by HMRC to UK income taxpayers as a matter of course. The destination of the transferred tax receipt would be a single fund from which monies would be drawn for the purposes indicated in the bill. This bill seeks to acknowledge the existence of conscience when spending money, to stop forcing people to pay for wars that they do not morally agree with, and to pay for weapons they cannot, in all conscience or reason, endorse. Madam Deputy Speaker, let's acknowledge the rights of individuals committed to this by extending the recognition of conscience in regards to war. You get the world you pay for. Let's allow the right to pay taxes for peace, not war. I beg to move.
The question is that the Honourable Lady have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. Virendra Sharma, Mr. Roger Godsiff, Alan Brown, Caroline Lucas, Michelle Thompson, Howell Williams, Martin Day, Kate Green, Liz Saville Roberts and myself, Madam.
Ruth Cadbury.
Income tax, non-military expenditure bill.
Second reading what day?
The Friday the 2nd of December 2016, Madam Deputy Speaker.
2nd of December 2016.